Go ahead, bring the guys in, okay?
Okay, here's Thomas.
Hey Ken, how you feeling?
Hope he can get on in a second. What I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and see how long I can hang in here before my energy level just drops. Let me introduce you to Malin. Malin, N4, I always want to say N3 for some reason, N4EG. Vanity called that. You forgot what last year finally did you get that one?
Yeah, it's been a while. I tried for a long time, and finally this one came up. I said, well, that's not too bad.
Okay. Here's George.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, guys.
Hey, George, how you?
Hello.
Perfect timing, George. I was just doing an introduction here to Malin. His real name is William. I'm not sure why they call him Malin or something like that. I think he's probably hiding from some sort of of nefarious activity in his past or whatever. He's AT&T guys, AT or Chesapeake Bay or Bell Cell Telephone or
Yeah, the old C&P.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
He comes out of the phone factory people anyway, and for many years, he's N4EG, kind of a cool vanity call sign. He has probably more experience in operating the CW, single sideband, all of the different stuff we move into as new technologies become available, more interest in FT8 and things like that. Malin has the knowledge of, because he pays attention to it more so than I do, of what's currently good on the band. When do you look for signals? I mean, there's nothing worse. You turn your radio on and you go to 7.125, which you think is really good, and you hear nothing, and you say, well, are the band conditions bad? Or is my antenna bad? Or is this not the time, to find signals? There are, in your coming new approach coming opportunities and with your general class license, opportunities to find what I call watering holes. There are places where, the people will congregate generally and at different times, and some make sense. And Malin says, well, yeah, there's nobody on at this time because, they're all at work. Or, boy, this gets real active here because, they just came home, and they're preparing for dinner and so that's one thing. But along with that, he says, okay, and the sun is going down, is dropping below the horizon, changing, the ionosphere, and the band condition change. Also, in middle night, same thing, transitions like that occur. In early morning when you go, in the winter time when it's getting light at 7 o'clock or so. If you're up at 6 o'clock, you get on the radio and all of a sudden you find different signals coming in, and they come in from different areas. And so if you monitor that in a more frequent way, mainly quite often he does. I know he likes getting up early in the morning, I don't. You know, I wake up at 10 o'clock, and that's it. So anyway, he has a lot more experience in that area than I do. And his long-term fascination with ham radio, has see things that didn't work that he's had to figure out to how he can make work. He's also a kit builder, very good kit builder, and he kind of likes a lot of the old radios, and he's a sucker for building any kind of tube type radio if that comes along as a kit or or receiver, or transmitter, or whatever. Because he's experienced that in many years ago, and he's experienced building it in the newer environment with the newer equipment, and he has some pros and pros and cons. My brain is not working as fast as my mouth is here. Sorry. So anyway, and Malin has been teaching this course also for years before I got involved in it. So. He a lot of times there are things that I'll say something. I do take some what I call literary licenses in explaining the technology of this. They're not complete untruths, but they're not complete accuracies. In some cases, they can be true. There's a stretch on them or whatever. Sometimes he provides the guidance to get me into proper thinking. Anyway, you tell him about yourself, Malin. I'm done talking about you.
You've said enough. Yeah, I've been in and out of ham radio for quite a long time. I was back as a kid. I had an interest in it, and eventually got a novice license back in the 60s and built a lot of radio stuff and accumulated a lot of radio gear over the years. And then things came along. I discovered motorcycles and girls and sports cars and, all those things that kind of happen in life. And radio kind of get put aside. And over the years, at various times, I've thought about getting back into it. Matter of fact, I even built a Heath kit and had some Ten-Tech gear I collected for a little while and thought about getting back on the air, but life happens, and then I got into sailing, and that that takes away everything. So that's something you can do with the family. So anyway, down the line I thought, well, maybe it's time to get back into it. So I went back and got my license again and started getting back on the air. And I kind of had an interest in running QRP, which is meaning running low power. And I put a solar panel up. You can see it behind me. It's actually, I put a larger one up since then, but I had a battery here in the shack that I charge during the day and run the radios at night. And the charge controller was noisy, so if I ran it during the day, a lot of times I'd have to pull the fuse from the solar panel and the charge controller to cut the noise out. It was coming on the DC line. So the way it interrupts the power, the cheap charge controller, okay, you get a lot of noise in beyond anything I could filter out. So anyway, and I've got the little Elecraft KX3, which is an excellent little QRP radio, and it covers most of the bands, and it will, biggest part is trying to find antennas to cover the other bands you can't get to, but it's low power, and it makes it a challenge to operate at times when the conditions are bad. It's a lot of, it's challenging to talk to anybody at times. And plus there's, a lot of, if there's a lot of noise, and you're going to find that on the HF bands, it's usually pretty noisy. So, and I see a lot of other people have that same problem. there are some of the guys in our group that we have breakfast with that live out in the country, and they are fortunate to be away from most of the things that cause the noise that we talked about. And when they live out in the country like that, usually they're away from all the man-made items that cause noise. All the little charge controllers that we have, their phones and their batteries for our tools and so forth, they can be very, very noisy, and they'll cause you a fit. So there are all kinds of things you'll learn about. I guess all y'all are techs now, is that correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, well, getting into HF gives you so much more and so many more options of operating and making long contacts and so forth. If you get away from that channelized, area that you're used to, a lot of times when you're on the 2 meters and 440 and so forth, usually people operate where there's a repeater, take advantage of that. Nothing wrong with that, okay? It's just that HF offers a lot. All of a sudden the world becomes a little smaller because you'd be talking to people across, maybe across the ocean, or, you just never know. And so it makes it a lot of fun. There's so many different things to try that y'all find that some of y'all probably spend a lot of time playing with antennas and trying different things like that, trying different radios. And Ken and I can give you a little bit of ideas on, when you start to look for radios, there's some websites you can go on and read about them. And don't believe everything you read. Kind of throw out the real bad and throw out the real good ones. And somewhere in between all that lies the truth of which, about the radio. And it depends upon how you want to use it, what you're expecting out of the radio, maybe as to which one to pick. Because something I might want may not be something you would be interested in. So it's hard to give people advice on a radio until they had a chance to decide what they want to do, what they're looking for in a radio. But there's a website called eham.net. And if you go on there, you can read reviews of almost any piece of ham equipment out there. But once again, you will find some people have a bad experience with what you might think is a perfect radio. So that's why I say sometimes you have to disregard just as if you read Amazon reviews, you kind of disregard some of the others. You just keep it in mind, but you might keep looking because there's always a bad unit or, radio in almost everything. Somebody's going to produce something that's going to be defective. So you put that aside. But main thing is look for someplace you can get support. And especially if you buy an older one, for instance, when you think it's a problem, some of the parts now have gotten so you cannot find a replacement for them. So that gets very difficult to repair those radios. Now, some of the older tube radios, actually, there's still parts out there for them. Unbelievable, but a lot of things you can find parts for. The problem being the newer ones is a lot of times there are chips on them that have been discontinued. And unless you can find the supply for that part, for that chip, you can't fix the radio. Sad to say, because, it's plenty of good radios. And all manufacturers seem to have their problems with different radios. I've looked quite a few times when I've been interested in a new radio, thinking about would I be interested in buying one of these. I will join a group where they have their groups on, I think it's used to be Yahoo. It's another group website now where you can go in there and read about almost any radio out there. As a group of owners, and they will write their feelings about the radio and maybe if they're having problems with them. And that's invaluable information. I mean, you can't hardly get any better than that because you can see what type of problems people are having and discussing on that group, whether it's operating it's difficult or whether they're having known problem that the manufacturer may know and doesn't really let you know. So there's a lot of things like that you can look into if you want to find out about a radio. And there are some people around town that may have a radio you're interested in. You could possibly even get with them and go see it. But I understand most of y'all are out of town. Is that correct?
Yeah, Richmond.
Are you in Richmond?
Yeah, West End and Henrico.
Oh, well, you're way out there.
Powhatan.
In Powhatan? Oh, okay. Well, you're close by. You can
I'm down in Colonial Heights.
Oh, you are? Oh,
Yes, sir.
that's way too far.
I know.
The Pony Express still goes down there, don't they?
Well, they have to pipe sunshine in still. But, yeah.
I did work down there one time. I went down to, you know where Chesed is, down at the
Yeah.
lake. And I cut a little telephone office when they built the building down there. I went down there and did, pretty much by myself most of the time. And then
Yeah.
they sent some help. But that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it because the locals would
Yeah.
all wave to you. It was really friendly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
On my way
Did you
down-
know you work for the phone company? Did you know a gentleman named C.L. Cates?
Yeah, Kate's.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a good friend of mine. He just passed away here a few months ago.
I thought I saw somewhere. I do get emails from one of the guys in the group, and it seems like they try to keep up to date with things that are
Yeah.
happening. But I didn't realize he had wasn't sure
Yeah.
he passed away. I thought I may have seen something about that.
Yeah, he was after he retired. I worked for the state until I retired. The Pocahontas building, he about single-handedly, I understand, did a lot of the work upgrading that building. He was telling me all the ins and outs when he found out I worked in there.
Yeah, it's a shame. So many of the guys I used to work with, and a lot of nice guys.
Yeah,
It's a shame, but too many of them have passed.
yeah,
And it gets upsetting when you realize that, all these people, we still think of them as they were 30, 40
Yeah.
years ago.
yeah,
It's
for
kinda
sure.
tough.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've been retired for a long time, mostly real tired, but
yeah,
I've been out of the phone company for quite a bit.
wow. Yeah.
But,
Yeah, well, CL was too for a good while. He had a good retirement for a long time.
that's good.
Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of guys took it early because they offered, buyouts.
yeah,
Were pretty good, and the packages, and you didn't know if there'd be another one, but they were doing
Right.
it there about once a year or so. And I kind of was afraid they were gonna not offer another one later, so
Yeah.
I bailed out and early, but not that I was ready to. I could have
Right.
bought a bigger radio, okay, if I'd hung in there.
Hey,
Afforded a little bit more power, okay.
I was going to say, you got to have your priorities.
Tell us all about your Electrocraft, your
My little Elecraft.
Electrocraft.
Yeah, it's actually one of the top little radios you can get, actually. And when they first, early on when they tested it, it was like on the very top of the list, at least for a short interval. And it's still way up there on the top of the ratings for all the radios. And there's a guy out in Colorado who, Sherwood is his name, who tests the radios. He has his own way of testing them, and he's well respected. So everybody wants a good rating from him. That's very important. If he tests the radio, he's going to let you know, what he thinks of it and so forth. And he does a lot of instruments in the, how he's testing radio and the receiver and the transmitter. And he'll let you know if there's anything wrong or how it rates. But and even the rating, so sometimes, a great radio still may not be the right radio for you. It's still a matter of the specs they use are usually in the receiver, the rating. And those that have the, low noise and the best signal handling, because you measure by the adjacent signals, how that interrupts and affects the signal you're trying to listen to. So it's very complex, and they do a lot of, he has a standard, and so does the American Radio Relay League, but I think he's more respected of those, of the testing labs. So that's always interesting to go to his site and look to see what he's saying about the latest radios.
I have to say something here about Malin's Electrocast, his QRP. We'll talk more about QRP later. And for starting out, QRP can be very frustrating because you're putting out 20 watts of power, and you're in an environment where you're competing for signals. People are putting out 100 watts or 1,050 watts, 1,500 watts. And so in some cases, the playing field is not very even. However, if you're putting out 20 watts and you get a contact in New Zealand, like one of our friends did recently, I mean, he's talking to this guy at 20 watts, the guy's talking back to him at a full kilowatt or more. New Zealand needed a kilowatt of power to get the signal here, but our colleague was talking to him on his radio with 20 watts. 20 watts was sufficient to get to New Zealand. I mean, that's a woohoo, happy feeling, kind of major event. So there are, the Q. I usually I like QRP radios. You can always buy an amplifier for it if you want more power. So there are some trade-offs there. I keep lusting over this new ICOM 705, that's coming out. It looks so nice, and I've read so much about it. There's not a lot of information about usage for it, and I talk to people and say, yeah, but you're running 20 watts, why don't you spend more? And I said, well, I can put an amplifier. Yeah, but when you put an amplifier on it, you're going to end up spending as much as you would if you bought a ICOM 7610 or something, which is a good argument. So often though, there are so many different options that it's hard to come up with a definitive judgment, so, but anyway, I'll let you continue on, Malin. I just wanted to make sure that QRP is understood a little bit better.
Yeah, I would not recommend you buy a QRP rig to start out with. I would recommend, there's so many 100-watt rigs out there at low prices, even brand new ones. There's the 891, which is a Yaesu 891, that you can buy them for, I think, what, about $700, $600, $700?
The 981As?
Well, the 891.
91.
Oh, 891. Okay.
It doesn't have the fancy touchscreen and stuff, but if you just want a 100-watt radio, it's well worth looking at. I mean, if you started with it, you could always put it in your car if you decide to operate from your vehicle or a remote location or something. But for the money, I don't think you can go wrong, because it also has a DSP, digital signal processing in it. Now, it doesn't have an antenna tuner, but for what you pay, it's hard to beat. But a little bit more money, and you can go to the ICOM 7300, which is, they probably sold 1 million of them, or a couple, maybe another $100 to $200 you can get, like Ken has. He has the 991, and is that called an A, Ken?
991A, yeah.
Which is the latest version with some improved features in it, and it even covers 2 meters and 440, I believe. It's quite versatile, actually.
It's got that C4.
Yeah.
C4FM, which is the fusion.
Fusion, yeah.
2 meters, which, and that's one of the reasons I bought it. Now, having said that, I've never used it yet. You know, they're putting, there's I think a fusion repeater that they're installing during this summer, during this time period. And when that gets done, you know, I think, yeah, that's something I want to try and see if it works. And, you know, if I like it, I may use it. If not, like, well, okay, that's cool. Did that, you know, move on to something else.
Who's installing that, Ken? Where's that going up?
It's in
You don't
power,
remember?
and they've been working on it. Last I talked to one of the guys in the club, it's been about a month and a half or two since I talked to them, but I think they were still working on getting it up and going. So I don't know what their problems were, you know, with the virus stuff going on. You know, people aren't able to get together and work on things like we were doing previously.
Mhm.
We have not had a club meeting at the church where we normally meet since back in February, March, I think was the last meeting we had,
Right.
where we got to see each other. So, and then Ken and I in a little group that we go on Thursday meetings, we were going up to McDonald's and meeting a bunch of others from other clubs and other people, you know, some were club members, other clubs, some weren't,
Mhm.
but it's a good group because we kind of catch up on what others were doing in other groups and other areas. And one of the guys was a member of the Power Tank Club, and he'd kind of tell us what they were doing. Some of the others were members of a DX club, where they like chasing those DXers, we call them, which means they have groups who go out and they might go to a remote island in the Pacific somewhere, or you know, you never know. They even did islands, and they were going. This group went to Tangier, I think, for at least 1 or 2
About that, yeah.
years, and operated from there. So, but it's, you know, it's a fun thing for those people because for them it's real important to try to make as many contacts as they can from every band. So if they work a station on one band somewhere in the Pacific, they'd try to work the same expedition on another band, and they'd try to get as many bands as they could, and they would get credit for it because they wind up getting certificates for if you cover so many countries. And when somebody would go on an expedition, a lot of times they'd find a place that there are no hams there. It's a remote place and nobody's talked to it maybe in 20 years or more. And they would go there and set up multiple stations and antennas and generators, and they would work from remote places. And a lot of times carry in their own food and water and so forth.
Yeah.
But it's very expensive. I mean, that's what they like to do. I'm just kind of, if I hear a weak signal and it's something looks like a challenge, I might give it a shot and try calling it. And it's fun. I've talked to New Zealand and Australia and those places before, both on sideband and CW. And it's fun trying to just see if they can hear and copy your signal. And it might take several times of calling, but you wait for it to get quiet. Or if you're just fortunate enough and you see him tuning up and coming on, that maybe you could be one of the first ones to call him when he puts out a call. So you got to be selective. But one night I lost the power here at the house, and I had the antenna was only up about 15 feet at the time. And I talked to a couple of different stations in the Midwest, one on 10 meters and one on 6 meters.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was running on AA batteries. So the guy was laughing at me because there I'm running just a few watts and he's running 800 watts, he tells me. So he was kind of laughing. Then I went to the other band and worked another station. So you never know what you can do. You're going to find it's a lot of different experiences on HF where you're kind of a little bit limited there with your tech license on, having that kind of fun with it and those different things.
Yeah.
I'm not putting down the 2-meter guys or anything. They're doing some remarkable things now. We have one of the guys is a tech we've been after him, trying to get him to get his general. And he's taken the test a few times and almost been there, but missed it by a couple questions. So anyway, we've been after him a little bit, trying to encourage him to get the general. And I think he eventually will. He's just tied up doing so many things that he hadn't had time. So, that's something Ken's going to talk to you about in a moment, about working on taking the test and following along, on the internet, taking tests. And I think that will help you out, because if you stay up on it, you want to try to take the test. And even if you don't pass, okay, it's because there's a lot of memory here. A lot of these things are regulations and rules. And one of the things is learning about the band plan. And I don't know if y'all have looked at the band plan yet or not, but I thought I printed out a copy of it, and I'll find it here in a few minutes. But you can go on the ARRL.net and you can just type in search. You don't have to join it for this. Just type in search band plan, and you can print it out in a PDF, and you can do color. I do the color because it makes it easier to distinguish the bands and where you can operate. I don't know if y'all can see this if I hold it up here. That's not coming up, is it?
Mhm.
Nah.
Hold it farther back a little bit. Yeah, now it's coming up.
Oh, okay.
Like-
You have it now?
It must be green because it blends in with your
Yeah, anyway, yeah, it's probably disappearing, but y'all, just write that down, and you go on there and search it and print it out. And what it does is it will show you, like, the say one of the hand bands, like the 80-meter band, for instance, and it will show you E will be the extra class, the A is the advanced, G being general, and the NT would be your novice tech. Now, they still have people out there who had novice license. They don't offer that class anymore. Now it's a tech. And then they have the amateur, what was that? The advanced A, but they don't offer that anymore either. It's just general, or you go to extra. And extras, gives you quite a bit more operating privileges. I had a friend when I got back into ham radio. I says, "How do you remember the band edges for the general?" He says, "Well, I don't. That's why I got an extra class license." That way you don't need to worry. You can just, if you're on the band, you're clear. But anyway, it's a good chart, and there's a lot of questions that deal with what's on this chart. And there's information down there that it'll tell you, like the 60-meter band, they'll talk about their questions. It's channelized. The only one, and that's going to be the only band that has marked channels on it. Okay. And it might ask you which sideband do you operate from on 60 meters. And 60 meters is upper, where 80 and 40 are lower. That's the normal operating. That doesn't mean you can't on 80 and 40, but if you're on 60, you have to operate on upper sideband.
I think that band plan is on page 97 of your book. I'm on the online edition, so I'm not sure if my page numbers are marked the same as yours. Look at page. I don't think that's right. It says page 97 of 561.
97. We don't have a 97, do we?
Yeah, I have it on page, chapter 1-2,
Yeah,
Okay,
right in the beginning.
yeah.
one. Yeah, that's black and white, but that's fine.
Yeah.
It's just it's a little bit easier to see if you want to go in there and print that out in color. And for a while there, we used to get them from the ARRL, and they were kind of plastic paper, so they were a little bit more durable. But I'm out of them. But anyway, that's good to have. You might even want to hang it up and use it so you'll know where the bands are and get familiar with it. If you have HF radios, I highly recommend you start playing with them and listening on the ham bands to get familiar with where the bands are. And because you'll need to know, like 40 meters starts at 7 megahertz and goes to 7.3. And I think you're going to find there'll be questions asking you about those, about maybe where, for general, where is the operating range for sideband voice? And for general, it'll start at 7.175 and goes to 7.3. There'll be questions similar to that on the test, and they're actually all the questions are in your book, as well as all the answers. Everything's in the book that you tested on. So if you got a great memory, you can read it and memorize it and it won't be a problem. But if you get familiar with the band plan, it will make things easier to visualize.
That is one of the areas that the ARRL and FCC kind of concentrate on. It's very important, the frequencies that we are given, that we do not get outside our frequencies and interfere with someone else. Therefore, at the very top of like the 40 meter band, which ends at 7,300, that we don't go at 73, 0.001, So there'll be a lot of times that as you're transmitting, that your signal occupies some space. It doesn't occupy just 7,300 or 72,999 or whatever. It occupies some width, and that has to be figured in. So if you're tuned at 73,295, is any part of your signal going beyond the 7,300? And we will talk about that in length later on. But there are numerous questions about that. And then there's the ones about, well, on the other end, because we will talk about your frequencies off your center frequency as the upper sideband and lower sideband. In your channelized environment, you have a channel and you got, 12.5 kilohertz of space, and, you sit in the middle of it and you never change, because the characteristics of FM is such that, you can limit that. Your frequency, doesn't move, in the same way as what it does, within, the single sideband type of modulation. And like CW, is much more narrower. So, having said that, that is one part that is you're always going to see some of those questions on an exam. The other part, that you're going to see, which I had in memory for a little while ago. Weird. Anyway, in order to get an idea of how those questions are, or work with the questions that are come up, there are a couple of websites that are available that give you practice tests. And one of the, there's, in my mind, there's almost two areas at least that you got to spend time on. One is that band plan, that thing, memorizing every, nuance, upper, lower limit, things like that. There's also power restrictions in some cases on that band plan for certain frequencies and stuff like that. That and the other is, the testing capability. The more often you look at a question and work on it and read it and give an answer to it, the more likely that that's going to stick in your memory. And you can say, well, I'm pretty sure I've looked at the test questions, but to take practice tests and find out, if you're really doing well or not, if you really are answering tests correct, is important. Well, ARRL has one, and what I'm going to do is a shared screen here to bring that up. Where is that little booger? Okay. Screen share. Here it is. This goes to the same place. I'm not sure, I found, both lead you to almost the same page, is slight difference. But either of these here links will put you right into where you want to be and do the practice. You don't have to be a member of American Radio League, to be able to utilize this here. Excuse me. Hope that's not COVID. This will put you in their exam room, I guess, and one of them will allow you to go in and say, well, I want to look at these questions in the same sequence as what they're printed in the book, in the way that the information, the way the text handles them. So, in chapter 1, you talk about introduction, and then some rules and regulations. Well, you don't really want to examine it as talking rules and regulations, and then also have questions in there about logarithms, because you haven't studied logarithms yet at that point in time, so it can keep you in synchronous, with the textbook. So ARRL gives you a couple options, the ability to do that. And as you can see here, this is one of the other things, and with the band plans, the one is much better with in color. It's got much more informative, and we have little notations on them. There's a lot of information about the 60-meter band, our only channelized band, in the lower frequencies. So, that's another one. The other area that you can go to is a company called QRZ. You put QRZ, and there I think you go to resources. So you gotta you gotta register with them. You gotta create a password or whatever. But if you go in there, they have exams, but I don't know that you can put it in the same sequence as the book. Their questions, I think, are more random. So, and they each have their purpose. In some cases, when you run the test, both of them, you might want to print out the results. It's not important that of those questions that you pass. It's more important to your learning experience for the questions that you fail, because those are the ones you got to look at over and over. Once you pass, like, I know that, I'm going to remember that. But the ones you fail, they say, oh, I got that question wrong. There's a reason for it, that you either don't understand what they're asking, there's a technology thing there or whatever, or the question may be ambiguous. There are some questions that they've come up with in each question pool. And this question pool now is one that was developed this last year, and it's better, but it still has some errors like, why is this question asked in this manner? It's a little bit confusing. So the ones you really need is to concentrate on are the ones that you get wrong. So there's nothing wrong in failing a test. It means you know what you've got to do. Okay, let me get rid of this here. Malin, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I'm running out of things I can talk about here. Go ahead.
I don't know if y'all read about the Q signals. I'm sure you probably heard of them, but that's something you'll need to know a few of them for the test. It's not too many, but hams even originally it was devised for CW. It's a short way of sending a message back and forth without doing a whole lot of sitting down sending characters. You can ask QSL, and that means it can mean either as a question or as a response. People say instead of did you copy, it was a QSL, and meaning you copied that. QTH is your location, or it could be asked what is their location. But it's abbreviation, and the Q signals were devised for that. And back in the telegraph days too, they used, I think, they may have used it then too. I'm not sure about that, but people still use that on sidebands. A lot of times people talk about their QTH, and like we talked about QRP, meaning that means reduced power, basically. Now, most people consider it for CW as 5 watts, sideband maybe 10 watts maximum power. That's only so people, when groups who operate QRP, they have a kind of a reference, we don't go over that power. But anyway, some of the guys who run high power will joke and consider QRP 100 watts. But Q signals did have a meaning, and that's why they use them. They still use them today because it's kind of an abbreviated way of getting something across. I was trying to think what else there was on the Q signals, but that's kind of the reason for them if you're wondering what they are, what the meaning is. And when signals are real weak, it's a whole lot easier sometimes to abbreviate something. People can will know what you mean. So there's some you really do need to learn for the test, but not a whole lot. The best thing to do is there's some you can print out without printing out every Q signal there ever was. There are lists where you can print out, it might be 20 or more of them out there that are more common that people do use still. And also at one time, hams used to handle a lot of traffic, meaning they handled communications, and they would pass it between amateurs, and maybe a ham would relay it to another station further across country. And they had, it's how they came up with the relay, the amateur ARL's, the American Radio Relay League. And the Q signals, there were a lot of them that detailed information that were messaging. And also because they had nets, there were Q signals that, might pass control of the net between people and information as such. But those are rarely used unless you really were active in some of those, aspects of the radio. but it doesn't, you do need to learn a few of them. And I think they're more in the front of the book when you're reading through there. And you'll probably see some questions on it. There are things like CW, well, that's continuous wave. It's you just transmitting on and off, kind of a digital signal, the first. And now a lot of I'd say most of the new radios will actually decode CW to a certain extent anyway. Mine actually will do that. It's not always good, but it will do it. Noise and so forth tends to affect usually the decoding of that. So they usually have a lot of erroneous digits and so forth in there. Most people, start out, and I would say they go with sideband once they get on HF. And there's some things you'd be learning about that as you read. There's the upper and there's a lower. It's actually a double sideband, meaning you have both the sidebands. And I think we might be able to demonstrate that later. By the way, Ken, Bruce said he had a recording of that. So,
that may work well for us, yeah.
so we might be able to show you a demo that we were doing when we had classroom. And we set up some radios, and I've got a little pan adapter, which a pan adapter shows you a spectrum, a frequency range. And, you can adjust the width of that. But we could show you what the signal looked like. And we'd send from one radio to the next in the same room by just putting a dummy load on the transmitter, meaning it has just a resistor match of 50 ohms for the output of the transmitter, and we just cut the power way down. But it allowed us to put oscilloscope on and also a pan adapter, and we can show you what signals look like on those. Sometimes it makes it easier to understand when we talk about like FM and AM and sideband signals, because you can kind of get a feels how much room you're using. When you go to FM, all of a sudden you see how broad that is. And that's why on HF bands, you don't have as much range in the frequency. So they don't, generally a lot of them, they don't use FM at all, except 10 meters has a spot on 10 meters. I think you can use it there. 6 meters does too, but most of the time they use sideband because sideband is narrow compared to most other, compared to AM or FM. And it uses roughly about 3 kilohertz of frequency range. So it's makes it easier. More of the power goes into that portion of the signal. And it's a little narrow, so you can, filtering's narrow, so you cut out a lot of noise. And you get mainly the audio voice range. About 300 hertz to about close to probably about 2.7, 2.8 kilohertz. And you'll see the filter on most radios for sideband will say 3 kilohertz or 2.8. So, and that's all you need for, conversation. If you get to CW, you'll find people, they'll go all the way down to 50 hertz. Because you can turn it really, really narrow and listen to a little slice of the signal and cut out the signals around it.
See, and that's one of the nice things about people that work with telephony, telephone company people. Their concern is being able to get a clear signal between certain frequencies, like, what is it, Malin, 300 to 3,000?
Yes.
Somewhere in that range, to be able to transmit that energy through all these wires and stuff and have it get, from one transmitter, one phone to another, with minimal losses and without interference and without other things. And so a lot of the amateur radio stuff comes out of like a collaboration between the two subject areas, you know. So, you know, it's we kind of benefit each in some ways.
Yeah, they do, and it's amazing that you find ham radio when you wonder why maybe they do things a certain way. It's because over the years things developed, and you know that's where it's driven us to, I guess. Sideband still is probably the most popular form of transmission on the HF bands by far. There are some people that do AM. It's one of those things that maybe a Sunday morning, some of the guys will tune up their old radios to, who you know, like to operate AM. Because a lot of the really old radios, you know, would do AM only, and they would do CW and AM. That was it. But you don't find too much AM on there. It's just, it will be at times, but not too often. Now you will find that the ARRL will have contests, and they might have one weekend, it might be a CW contest. And if you tune down those into the band, you'll hear hundreds of signals going in there, where normally it may only be a few in there. And the same way, they'll have sideband contest on there. And once in a while, I think they have an AM or something contest going. So you're going to find that usually those contests, by the way, are on the main bands, such as 80, 40, 160, 20 meters. That's where a lot of guys would get on 30 meters or 60 meters on the weekend, because there's no contest going. So if you just want to talk to somebody and make contacts, you can go to some of these other bands that they're actually newer. The privilege is to operate on those bands. It's not new now, but it was. And they tend not to have contests going on them deliberately to let hams get on there and, you know, just run normal communications. But the contests are good because people learn how to operate in an environment with a lot of stations calling. You learn the procedures that they operate under. A lot of times there's they'll have a station on the air somewhere. They'll have like a historical event somewhere, and might be lighthouses, for instance, and people go and operate from a lighthouse. So, and they just contact anybody wants to talk to them. And usually you'll get maybe if you operate so many of them, you'll get an award, or you might have a special, another Q signal, QSL card, showing that the information on the card will show that you contacted them and the time and date and maybe the power, maybe his name, whoever you talk to, or her name. You don't hear people talk about QSL cards much anymore because most everybody does digital, log it on their computer. And then if you want a enter for contests, you send it to the ARRL, and they have a logbook of the world, they call it, where they match up your contact off your computer off of theirs, and they cross-reference them. And if they get a match, they will send you a note saying they had a confirmation for that contact. So that's how most of that happens nowadays. But in the old days, it was buying a lot of postage stamps, going to the post office and mailing you cards out every week. And I gotta say, it was great fun getting a card from somebody far distance away, and they might make nice little remarks in it. And, you know, you kind of develop a friendship with people that way. And maybe hopefully again, you know, you'll hear them again on the air another time. You would think CW wouldn't be very personal, but actually it is. You find people on there are much more courteous, and they just, I don't know, just seem to be a lot nicer when you get on there. If you ever get an interest in it and want to learn the code, you know, I would recommend it, you know, after you get your license and get that out of the way. It doesn't hurt, and it can be, you find it's a great amount of fun because there's a lot of slow speed guys. There's, besides me, but there's some slow speed nets where they operate, 5 to 10 words a minute or so, So at one time a few years ago, you had to have code, learn the code to pass your test for general and novice too, actually. But they had lowered the requirements to like 5 words a minute, so that it was pretty easy actually for that part. The hard part is getting over that 13 words a minute, getting up to that. You'll find it is harder, but the main trick is to it's one of those things, you just do it. You just get on there, and the more you operate on it, the easier you find it is, and the more you get familiar. Because everybody gets so they sin in the same way when they talk. You ask the RST, that's your readability, signal strength, and your tone for code. Now you don't give the tone, of course, if you're doing a voice transmission, but everybody wants to know what the signal strength is. You want to know you're getting out, and maybe you want a comparison. So everybody looks at what you call the S meter on your receiver, which is signal strength. And nowadays, of course, the transceivers, that meter usually has multiple functions. On transmit, it'll show you your power, and it might show you standing wave ratio, it's drive power for the finals, all kinds of stuff. But on receive, everybody practically wants to know, because they might want to say, I like to switch antennas. Could you tell me what my signal strength is when I switch to a different antenna, to see which one maybe is getting out the best? Or maybe the other one's, he's going to swing his beam around to you, his Yagi, which is directional. He might turn that around and aim it towards you, and he'll ask you, well, did my signal strength come up or not? Normally it does, but there have been times, every now and then you'll hear about a report where somebody had their Yagi was pointing 180 degrees away from you, meaning that signals going around the earth coming back to you. And that's happened, more than once, but I've heard quite a few tales of those happening. But that gets in later chapters. So anyway, I don't know, I assume y'all all read the first few chapters. Anything in there y'all wondering about, or questions about any of that? I know they even deal with some emergency operation. Basically, it's like, well, if you got emergency, operate, okay? Regardless, whatever it is, if it's life-threatening, they pretty much give you a lot of leeway. And most of the rules are common sense, if you think about what they're asking about them. I don't know, there's a few rules, about what you talk about and so forth. Most times, well, they talk about almost everything, but normally, hopefully they stay away from politics and playing music. But there's, it talks about races and areas and some of those things, which you probably found that in the 2-meter world, the tech world, where they areas and races, and they operate with for emergency civil service, which is a great thing. But there's a lot of guys who are in a club and other clubs who do get on some of the nets on the 2 meters, by the way. I don't know if y'all have listened to them, but they usually on there once or twice a week, and they usually try to keep that up pretty close. I haven't listened lately, but anyway, we have a guy in the club that was big into it. I guess they talk about all the regulations, and we're in region 2. When they speak of regions, the band plan will talk about that. I think right here will tell you on the band plan that, this pertains to region 2. Because if you get in region 1, there's always differences sometimes of what privileges they have on the bands. And so, some places they can't operate. There are places that we have restrictions because there's other users. Like if you read 30 meters, you can only use 200 watts on the 30-meter band. And, there were other people using that band too, other services than ham radios. So, you don't interfere with another signal if you hear it. Try to avoid it. And it's a common practice when you get on, you want to listen for a little bit to make sure no one's on there or adjacent to you. So it's nice to look around and see that. Oh, Ken's measuring voltage here on something.
No, I'm getting ready, for the next thing here. I'll let you finish.
Oh, well, I just, I don't know, that was just about, I just let you know that just want to be courteous more or less to other people when you're on there if you can. Hopefully they'll be that way back to you. And I won't say everybody's courteous on there, okay? Sometimes it reminds me of the old Citizens Band when you get on there. But
Yeah.
it's kind of embarrassing because hams usually are pretty good about self-policing themselves. So, that was one thing I think a lot of hams took pride in, is the fact that they kind of policed themselves and looked out for the bands, because we all suffer if we lose them. And the ARL always encourage them. One of the things having contests is encourage people to get on the air and operate. And you'll find sometimes you think a band is dead, get on there and call CQ. And quite often you'll find there are people out there. Somebody will come back to you. And the Elecraft radio I have, one of the designer and builder of these things, he used to put on the internet sometimes, I'm on 20 meters now or 10 meters or whatever. He doesn't hear anybody. He says, I'm on there now. And he just put out a call on the internet. And next thing you know, there's a dozen people on there talking. So everybody thought the band was dead. Nobody was on there listening. So, and he would take some of the little radios that Elecraft makes, he'd take them hiking up a mountain trail and operate while he was walking and talk all over the place. So it's pretty amazing. Anyway, I know there's a lot of rules to learn, and there's, restrictions of what you can do, you can't do, different bands. And that's why the band plan has that information on that one sheet on a lot of that. So doesn't have everything, but it has quite a bit on there if you read that thing and look over the little notes. Y'all have any other questions about any of this stuff?
Not right now.
Oh, I think Ken's going to show you some about, have y'all read chapter 4 yet?
Mhm. Yeah, I've read chapter 4.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Thomas, Gerald, y'all
I
read?
have not read chapter 4.
Oh,
I did 3.
yeah, that's probably the worst chapter in the whole thing.
Oh, great.
It's
Looking
just,
forward to it.
yeah, well, it just covers so much. And if you haven't, had any experience with it, it covers a lot of territory. And that's where Ken excels at. He's good at putting all the little pieces in the puzzle in there, I just hand him some pieces and he puts them together. But
That's what we're gonna start for next week, is chapter 4. One thing I would like you to do to prepare for, how many of you have a digital voltmeter? Like that's on the screen now. You got one of these?
Not yet.
No?
No.
Get one.
Harbor Freight.
Harbor Freight. This is $6 or something, $8, under 10 anyway.
You can get one for
Yeah.
$1 if you want to splurge.
I don't know what to do with it, but I have one.
Okay. Well, we'll
I
show you,
test batteries occasionally.
we'll show you what to do with it. Harbor Freight also sometimes has a free coupon for these here if you buy something else. And I would always save their coupons, and if I go there and buy something, I always get one of these. So I've got like 3 or 4 of them. And why do I need 3 or 4 of them? I don't know, but you can lose them. You keep one in your car all the time. If you go on a vacation, take it to your vacation house. We would do that. They have the damn light switches wouldn't work in the place, and so at least you had a meter. You could do some testing. Anyway, very simple to use. Accurate for almost any need that you're going to have for quite a long time. I never pay attention to polarity because it tells me that here's a battery I've got. This is a lithium ion battery of a cell phone. And with my vision, I just go and test it. It says 3.8 volts. Okay, so it means I've got the positive on the plus and negative. If I put it the other way, the nice thing it does, it says this is negative 3.8 volts. So you tells you what you're doing. Doesn't have automatic power off or whatever. Got an old-fashioned regular switch to turn it off, and bingo.
And the nice thing about it, if you're in the wrong setting and you plug it into the wall outlet to check the wall outlet, you haven't lost a big investment. So
yeah, if you drop it or something like goes in the water, you've lost $6. So it's not a lot. Anyway, for the next chapter, chapter 4. We start talking about, the very first page, they start talking about, let me do a screen again and get that puppy up here. Where is it?
4-1, talk about power, Ohm's law, and
Yeah, no, I meant in my thing here, I'm trying to find out. I can do a slider on the bottom.
oops.
There we go. Okay, chapter 4. Here we are. And the first thing they talk about power and decibels. Don't remember any formula. Don't pay any attention to them. I don't want you to start out learning any of these formulas, wasting your time, because there are other more important things we'll talk about. And then later on, I'm going to show you how to use these formulas in a much, much easier way. All right? So if you're worried about math or whatever, forget it. I'm not going to do any math. Well, 3 plus 4 is how much? If you can do that, that's not math. That's about all we're going to do for most of this chapter. We may spend 2 sessions on this chapter just because there's a lot in it. It covers a wide area, and it depends upon your level of understanding, the questions you have, whatever we found in some classes. There are people that just say, I don't get this. I want to get it. How can I? And we'll spend some time on that. So this is what I want to start talking about next week when we pick up on this here. And, this here part, yeah, you remember, that, because we're going to use some of that in there, but other than that, nothing else right now. So, I think that's it. I'll have, I think I'm running out of energy here. I'm going to have to kind of call it quits and go on. Malin, you want to continue on here, or I'll turn it over to you, and you can do what you want. You've got host privileges, so you can run as long as you want, and then close meeting for all. You need to be the last person to sign off because you'll close the session out.
All right.
All right, so you guys can talk about it as much as you want. I saw something here that Malin touched on a little bit before, and you might want to talk about in chapter 3. Now I probably can't find it, but they were talking about building, kit building, and there's a nice little picture in there about with a 100-watt single sideband amplifier. That I think the schematic came out of ARRL and whatever. But since I've been in the hospital, my things have kind of slowed down. Before I went there, I got this here. 5.8 gigahertz frequency counter. It's a kit. It comes in a bag, plastic bag with a whole bunch of parts. Now, why would I need something that goes out to 6 gigahertz almost? I don't know, but because it can, because it's there, this kit was in the $75 range. Not cheap. Usually, I'm a sucker for anything under $50 usually. This is a little bit more expensive, and this one will go up to 800 megahertz as it is in way for that amount. But there's a $25 unit that plugs into it that then takes it up to 6 gigahertz. That has to be ordered. I figure if I get this one working right away, then I'll spend another $25 at least. I know that I've wired it up fairly decent. So that's come through. Since I've been in the hospital, Amazon has come by.
All right.
DigiKey, a parts supplier. We'll talk about how, you want to build something, you need a part. This is one of the companies, this and Moser and a couple other ones are really good sources for parts. The problem is a lot of times I'll buy something from one of these suppliers and it's a part that costs $1.99 with $3 shipping. So trade-off. And I have no idea what's in here. Oh, this is a learning course, great courses or whatever. So these are my toys for this week, the rest of it to play with and find out what's happening and see if I can get my life back to a regular schedule. I was very pleased by the care I got in the hospital. Chippenham, Johnson Willis, good organization. They provided me with really, really good care. Here's what came in the packages. These are like alligator clips that latch on for printed circuit boards. And for breadboarding, I'm building a huge breadboard. By breadboard, we mean building on circuits like this here. This here is a power supply 12 volts in and puts 3.3 volts into one side of the rail and 5.25 volts on the other side of the rail. You then have connections in between that you can connect, to whatever device you're working on. At the same time, part of my system will have a miniature, what's called, pick it up here. Miniature oscilloscope. It only goes up to 200 kilohertz. Not a whole lot, but it's great if you want to work on op amps or transistors, do some testing, and if you want to learn. And for me, a lot of this is part of it is learning process. My early education in electrical engineering school was with all tube circuitry. And by the time I got out of school, went in the Navy, right after that, the transistors became much more important in the world in communication. And you were taught transistor theory and well, I missed an awful lot of that. And I worked with transistors and integrated circuits, but I've only worked with them as, yeah, this is what that does, but here somebody has to tell me what the inputs are and what the biasing are and how the rest of the circuitry has to be constructed so that the device will work properly. If I followed their rules closely, it would work. If I wanted to change to make it better or worse or something, I didn't know how to do that. So this effort that I'm going through now, I have a very, very good video course that I have taken. It cost me $30, but it's on modern electronics. And I'm going to actually use parts of that I'm stealing, there's a professor there is at college in Ohio, and he's a very good professor, good lecturer, interesting to listen to. I'm stealing some of his good examples and ideas to be able to use to explain things better, just because I've learned so much from that. The thing that I would eventually like to do is get to the point where I can say, here's a device, I'm plugged it in, and now this is how much signal I want to put in. I want to be able to, change that signal so I can either amplify it 5 times or 10 times or 1,000 times or more. I would like to be able to get to this point someday where I can really design receiver front ends so that I can actually, this is the circuitry that does it, and what are the trade-offs in it, what will work, and what price range can I do this. I'd really like to be able to become a radio RF designer engineer. I'm a tinkerer, but and from tinkering you learn a lot of things, but to be able to really become good in it, you got to make a lot of mistakes because you learn from your mistakes, and I'd like to expedite that because I'm running out of time. I'm getting old. They keep putting me in the hospital for stuff. So. Okay, I'm going to sign off here, Malin. I'll turn it over to you, and I'll see you gentlemen next Thursday.
Okay.
And we'll start chapter 4, and I'm not sure if we're going to finish chapter 4 in one session. I think that may be 2 sessions or 1.5, something like that. Okay, thank you all.
All right.
Thanks, Ken.
Take care.
Thank you. Thanks for your all your messages and kindness and concerns. I really appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care, buddy.
Talk to you during the week.
Take
Okay.
care.
Anyway, yeah, I was talked to him a few times while he was in the hospital, so it's